Hello everyone, yep, I'm Dan Basher, and I'm going to be talking, as I said, about OT cybersecurity in the railway. Quick overview, we're going to be talking about, quick introduction about the railway and how cyber is managed, talk about sort of the projects that we've been working on, the 3 strands of said project, current progress, and a bit about what we want to do in the future. So who are we? I work for Digital Transit Limited. We're a small company. We were based in Lancaster and Huddersfield. We do a whole range of things from software safety assessment, training in safety engineering. We develop condition monitoring tools. And in the last sort of year or so, we've been moving into the cybersecurity space. So a bit of background about the project. It's an Innovate UK project. It's going to be running over the next 3 years. We started about 4 months ago. So you're really getting to see the intro into this project, where we've got to so far, and what our big plans are for the next 3 years. So, why is this important? I'm not going to mince words here. Cybersecurity in the railway is poor currently. They've done surveys about people's awareness of cybersecurity. They get very poor results back. There are lots of companies who are talking about what they're doing. I'm not going to name names here. We've discussed with operators, and we say, what are you doing? They say, oh, you won't believe it. We're doing this, that, and the other. We've started putting some policies in place. Right, okay. That's not where you need to be. We're in 2023 now, 2024 even. You need to be a lot further ahead of that. Why else? Because in the railway industry, the governing laws in place are the NIS regulations, which are basically placed against operators. So think Abellio Greater Anglia, Northern, TransPennine, Avanti West Coast, people who are running the services. They are given the responsibility for cybersecurity, which means that the supply chain are much less interested. So for them, it's important that we can make it as easy for them as possible to do as much cyber as possible. Now, what is it we want to do? We want to develop a compliance tool. Now, we've been giving training courses on a technical specification, TS50701. I apologise if I start listing a lot of numbers in this presentation. Essentially, it's about how to apply OT cybersecurity to the railway industry. It's based off the IEC 62443 suite of standards. So what we want to do is we want to make it as easy as possible for people to start developing cybersecurity management systems, to start considering how they want to do risk assessments for their assets, and basically to bring up the competency of the industry. And how are we going to do it? Well, I'm sure you're going to hear the word AI a lot today. We want to make the most of AI. We want to look at natural language processing. We want to look at using databases to help manage things, automatically produce documents, work people through how to do risk assessments, all that good stuff. So again, project description, what do we want to do? We want to create a tool. Now we're looking at creating a plugin for Enterprise Architect, which is a tool that can be used for all sorts of project management, requirements management, developing models that can then be used, again, to do things like produce documentation, to keep your projects on track. In this case, we wanted to use it to keep your cybersecurity on track. So I mentioned 3 strands. What are the 3 strands of this project? We want to do standards modelling. So this is going back to the IEC 62443 I mentioned before. We want to look at that from the perspective of 2 different groups of people. We're considering the operators, as I mentioned before, but also system integrators. So this is your likes of Hitachi, Siemens, Stadler. People who are building trains. They might be building large infrastructure for the railway. And that's important because the 2 different groups are doing different things. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all tool. There are going to have to be different things available for different groups. And so the way we model the standards and the parts of the standard we model have to be different for those different groups. Next, we want to get our large language model. These things are incredible. In the last 2 years, what can be done because of these large language models is massive. Before, if you had hundreds and hundreds of documents, you've got to have someone either read them or scan them or use some other technology. Now, you load them all into a large language model and it'll automatically find everything you want from it. It's fantastic. I'll get into that a bit more in a while. And the 3rd strand, case studies. There's not a lot of best practice in the railway industry for cybersecurity. There's no great examples of what's being done. So we want to use this to do that and to give people an idea of this is what good looks like. This is where you need to be. So I mentioned Enterprise Architect and standard modelling. What sort of things are we going to do with that? So let's say you're working through your process in the Railway industry, there's a standard called 50126. That's a V life cycle model. If you think about your systems engineering, you go through from your concept to requirements, architecture, design, up the other side, validation, verification, and then putting your asset into service. And we want to help guide people through that, but specifically on the cybersecurity activities. Now, in the railway, there is a massive emphasis on safety. The UK has the safest railway in the world, bar none. It's incredible. And basically no accidents happen ever. So safety is really high. However, integrating that safety with cybersecurity is where you start having a problem, because teams don't talk to each other. You end up with little silos. Everyone's sort of trying to get their little bit in. So the idea is, by using this, you can say, right, we're at this stage of the life cycle. Here's what safety should be doing, here's what design should be doing, here's what cyber should be doing, and here's where there needs to be crossing over. Here's the artifacts that are going to have to be passed backwards and forwards. So as you go through that, we're doing things like storing the security requirements, and then automatically, because we're modelling this within sort of a database structure, it should be able to point out, right, well, here's where you're missing something. Here you've got an asset, but there's nothing attributed to it in terms of risk or in terms of requirements for it. You've got a connection here between something that is a safety system, let's say a signalling system, and you've just stuck a nice little IoT device on it because you wanted to monitor it. All of a sudden you've got a connection between the internet and one of your safety critical systems. It's a bad idea. And as part of that, we want to consider a massive number of standards. We don't just want to say, think about your OT only. Like I said, there needs to be working together between these different areas. So we want to be considering the safety, organisational standards like your quality management system, and we want to be considering in not just at your operational level, but also your corporate. So this is my favourite bit. Now, the large language model. So we are currently just using an existing large language model. We're using Llama 2 7B currently, which is sort of a medium-sized chat model. And what we've been using is something called Retrieval Augmented Generation, RAG. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this is like cheating. These things are incredible. You basically take your query, you have your question, and before it gets to your model, you send it through this retrieval, I'm going to call it RAG. You send it through your RAG, and it looks through all the documents that you've put in there. For example, we've currently put standards, best practice in cybersecurity for OT in there. And it looks through it and it says, right, that's relevant, that's relevant, that's relevant, that's relevant. Throws it all into your query before then sending it onto the chatbot. We don't have to train it to do this. We don't have to. We can put weights on different documents to say how much it should be taking from each of them. But for the most part, it all works automatically. And it gives us back an answer which contains all of the relevant information we want. And the main thing that we're changing and varying at the moment is, again, the weighting on the different documents and also which documents we choose to include. Because the worst thing you can do for any sort of AI is give it bad data. The moment you give it bad data, you're going to start getting bad results. Now, one of the things we want to do with this tool is most companies will have some sort of existing documentation, or perhaps they'll be producing documentation that we then want to assess. So the question was, how do we feed this large amount of information that people have already got into our large language model? Now, you can train models, but that's incredibly energy and time intensive. So we thought, what if we use a RAG for this as well? So you use an initial RAG to load in all of your documentation that you have. You send your query into that. Well, in this case, it'd be our query that we send into that saying, okay, where is your policy on passwords? Keep it nice and simple. It goes, it looks in that documentation, finds everything relevant, then takes it through to the next stage, to the next RAG, where we have the standards and things that we mentioned before. It checks it against that, and finally, we get our answer. So we're using a two-stage system here, again, just to extract all the information we need automatically. There's no sitting there checking everything bit by bit. And this is how we imagine it will look at the end. So you're going to get things like a score, which we think we could do through reinforcement learning, i.e. through case studies, through doing examples, we get lots of examples of these, of your cybersecurity management systems, different policies and procedures. We can rank them on a score, which ones are good, which ones are bad, and then use that to then get an output of a score. We want to do things like a gap analysis, what's good, what's bad, what's missing, and then provide people useful areas for improvement. And again, because we're using LLMs, we can use generative AI to produce a lot of that automatically with big red squares around it saying this has been generated by AI. Please check this and review this before you submit this to your line manager. And we're also going to include a connection to these real-time threat databases. If you have a cybersecurity management system, you have a cybersecurity case. So as a systems integrator, you've collected together all of your assurance information to pass on to the operator to say this train that I've built is safe, is cyber secure for usage. Now, a safety case changes very rarely, hardly ever. Once you've made that, except for quite, unrealistic circumstances, it's going to stay the same. A cybersecurity case is changing constantly. There's always new threats. There's always new technology out there that's going to be a problem. And so therefore, we want to connect it up to these threat databases. Now I know these are more IT related databases. There are some OT databases in existence. We've talked to train operators, systems integrators. Where do you get your threat information from? Who do you report to? We get lots of different interesting answers. I've talked to people before who say, well, we just sort of just call our IT people and tell them there's a problem. There's no proper reporting going on. So this is sort of an initial list that we're looking into, but that's going to have to expand over time. And with the LLM having access to this real-time threat information, we should be able to always keep the information and the advice that we're giving people up to date and relevant. And because we're then going to have all this data stored within this database structure, it's going to be quite easy for us to do things like this, to generate diagrams, to generate documents for people. Now, a long-term goal is that we'd like to be able to read in not just text, but also diagrams themselves using a model, for example, like DALL-E. This is very much a research project, and that's the most researchy of the research projects as it gets. This is not easy, and you can imagine that there's an awful lot of confusion when you read in a diagram and somebody's used completely different symbols to mean completely different things. So this is an aspiration that we have, though, for the project over the next 3 years. And finally, as I say, case studies. We want to produce case studies because there aren't very many in existence. I always like to put this one up because this is a fantastic example of going through that left-hand side of the V that was produced for an ENISA conference a few years ago. And it's one of the only ones in existence. And I understand it's cybersecurity. People have to keep things close to their chest. You can't go around explaining every detail of your system. That's mad. However, if this best practice doesn't exist out there for people to see, no one knows where to start. Especially in OT, this is a big issue. Now, we want to do several case studies. The main focus of this is, of course, rail, but we're also looking to other sectors such as energy. And this is a joint project with a company in Singapore. So we'd like to do ones both in the UK and in Singapore and sort of compare how that is different. In terms of the project timeline, we're looking to have an alpha ready sort of May next year sort of time. May this year, sort of, I keep forgetting it's 2024. May this year. And we're sort of releasing that to select few people, mostly operators and systems integrators, to get their feedback, find out what's helping, find out what's useless, and we can get rid of, and have a final release around April 2025. This is if any of you are in the railway industry, you are operators, systems integrators, who are interested in this tool, you're interested in testing it or giving feedback about what you need in your day-to-day job, please talk to us. You can contact me, you can find me, I'll be around. We're really interested. You can go to our website to contact us as well. We want this to be useful for people. We don't want to be producing something over the next 3 years and get to the end of it and find that actually it's no use to anyone. So we're always looking for feedback and to find out what people are interested in. Thank you very much for listening. Cheers. Thank you.
Does everybody know about IEC Section 443? Does anyone have any questions for Dan? Anyone?
Probably fold you up right, and I've seen that in other sectors. The issue is safety and security, pulling together, pulling apart.
Yeah.
So where the cyber world says, I've got to fix it, and actually leads to safety incidents.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm interested in terms of how you actually are able to manage that, so that people are aware of those
aware of the contradictions between cyber need to fix things as soon as possible, safety need to do it the right way, which can be slow, and that is an issue. Manufacturing, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go for it, yeah, have a chat.
Well, that's what you want. You put your hand up first and then we'll go to you, but we'll come over to the microphone so you can start playing everywhere.
So is this currently being designed as a modular solution where you could use different regulatory standards? So outside of the rail sector, so for example like aerospace, airborne software, could it be, because I know you mentioned looking for case studies in different operational environments. Is that the kind of thing that would be possible?
Absolutely. So one of the great things about the RAG I mentioned earlier is you can swap out in and out whatever you want. If we're talking about a different industry, energy, manufacturing, you can swap in the relevant standards and regulation, and it will respond from that instead. And yes, we are absolutely. The focus of the project is for rail, and so a lot of the deliverables that we have planned are specifically for rail. However, we're absolutely looking, especially towards the end of it, to look for other industries and to test how interchangeable it is between them. We understand there's a few unique things about the railway industry. For example, the fact it has a massive premises. Think about the amount of land that Network Rail owns. It's unbelievable. You know, bridges, they own various fields that they don't do anything with. They own lakes and reservoirs. You know, it's just a huge business premises in the railway. And it's international as well. You think about like the Eurostar that travels between the UK and France, and you've got to try and consider how to manage the cybersecurity of like an international railway. It's very complex. However, a lot of the same principles apply in terms of operational technology. You've got to think about availability before you think about your security sometimes, which can be quite difficult to balance. So, sorry. Yeah, anyway. Thank you.
Would you bring this in like as a life cycle model so that you're also doing like replacement, like servicing, so it comes in for 20 years or whatever, and if any parts need to be replaced, for example, like the cybersecurity is considered availability, things like that? Yeah,
so the idea is that this does cover your whole life cycle. This isn't what the focus at the moment is definitely on the left-hand side, building up your requirements, but when we're talking about having the threat databases integrated, that is very much thinking about the whole life cycle, and once you have all this data in one place, it makes perfect sense to keep using it.
It pulls all the different parts
exactly,
together.
and then you can use that for ongoing maintenance and patching and new vulnerabilities appearing, how you deal with them.
Excellent. I think that wraps us up at time, so please, everybody, give a lovely round of applause.
Thank you very much.